That bottle of amoxicillin in your medicine cabinet cost you $43 last month. The one before that, $61. And the doctor who prescribed it spent 4 minutes with you before reaching for the pad. Now, picture a quart jar on a wooden shelf in a Lancaster County pantry. 3 herbs inside. Vinegar the color of dark amber. It has sat there for 6 weeks, costing the family who made it less than $3, and it has handled every sore throat, sinus infection, and winter chest cold that walked through their farmhouse door this year. This is not folklore. The Amish settlements of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the oldest in America, planted in 1737, have been making a fermented herbal preparation for over 200 years that researchers studying Amish populations have repeatedly noted in their lower rates of routine antibiotic use. Johns Hopkins has spent decades examining the genetic isolates and health patterns of the Lancaster Amish, and one finding keeps surfacing. Their first response to common infection is almost never pharmaceutical. It is a yar. I am going to walk you through what is in that jar, why it works, why your grandmother probably knew about it, and why no doctor in the last 50 years has ever mentioned it to you. Stay with me to the end, because the woman who taught me this, Miriam Byler, 81 years old, 4 miles outside Bird in Hand, shared one final detail about how her mother sealed these jars that I have never seen written down in any book, and it changes everything about whether the ferment actually works. My name is not important. What matters is that 3 winters ago, my wife Eleanor caught a respiratory infection that would not let go. 3 rounds of antibiotics. Each one knocked her down harder than the bug itself. By February, she had lost 11 pounds, could not climb our staircase without resting, and her own doctor shrugged and said her gut would recover eventually. Eventually. That word. Our neighbor across the field is a retired school teacher who married into a Mennonite family 2 generations back. She watched Eleanor decline through the kitchen window for a month before she finally walked over with a small mason jar wrapped in a tea towel. She did not say much. She set it on our counter and said, "A spoonful in warm water, 3 times a day, and call me Friday." By Friday, Eleanor was sleeping through the night for the first time in 6 weeks. By the following Friday, she was carrying laundry up the stairs without stopping. I am a man who spent 31 years selling commercial insurance. I do not believe in miracles. I believe in evidence. And the evidence was sitting in my wife's color, her breathing, her appetite. I asked our neighbor where the jar came from. She said her sister-in-law made it. Her sister-in-law learned it from a woman named Miriam Byler in Lancaster County. 2 months later, I was sitting at Miriam's kitchen table with a notebook, and that is where this story really begins. The ferment has 3 herbs. That is the entire complexity of it. Garlic, fresh horseradish root, and thyme. The base is raw apple cider vinegar, the kind with the cloudy mother still alive in the bottle. That is the entire ingredient list. The Amish call it the cold jar, or sometimes the long jar, depending on the family. The Pennsylvania Dutch name, in the old dialect, translates roughly to keeping medicine. Miriam's mother kept 4 of them at all times, rotated through the seasons. Miriam herself has not bought a bottle of cough syrup in 53 years of marriage. But here is where the story turns. Because if this works, and it does, the obvious question is why nobody told you. Why your mother stopped making it. Why your grandmother probably knew it and your generation lost it. The answer is in the timeline. Pennsylvania Dutch home medicine traditions were thriving in rural American kitchens straight through the 1930s. Then came the post-war pharmaceutical expansion. Penicillin became cheap and widely distributed by the late 1940s. By 1955, the same families who had kept these jars for a century were being told by traveling salesmen, new family doctors, that the old ways were unsanitary, primitive, embarrassing. The jars went into the garbage. The recipes went unwritten. 1 generation. That is all it took to lose 200 years of working knowledge in mainstream America. The Amish did not throw their jars out. They were not on the salesman's route. They did not have a family doctor pushing the new pills. They kept making the ferment because their grandmothers were still alive in the same kitchen, watching. So why does it actually work? Garlic, when crushed and exposed to air, produces a compound called allicin, well documented in nutritional literature, with measurable antimicrobial activity against the common bacteria responsible for strep, sinus infections, and bronchial complaints. Fresh horseradish root contains volatile compounds that clear the sinuses in a way no decongestant tablet matches. And traditional herbalists have used it for upper respiratory complaints for at least 400 years. Thyme contains thymol, the same compound found in commercial mouthwash, with documented antibacterial action. Now hold all 3 of those in vinegar for 6 weeks. The acidic environment extracts the active compounds and stabilizes them. The raw vinegar contributes its own population of beneficial bacteria. What you end up with is a single liquid that hits a respiratory infection from 4 directions at once: antibacterial, antiviral support, mucus clearing, and immune-supporting probiotics for a per-dose cost of roughly 7 cents. Compare that to a single course of prescription antibiotics. $50 to $100 out of pocket if your insurance box. 3 to 10 days of gut destruction, increasing resistance with every round. And no help at all if the infection turns out to be viral, which most winter infections actually are. The Amish did not need a study to know this. They had 200 years of watching it work in their own families. But the studies are catching up. Researchers at multiple institutions have documented the broader pattern. Amish children show measurably lower rates of asthma and allergies. Amish adults consume significantly more fermented foods, raw dairy than their non-Amish neighbors, and the Lancaster settlements show patterns of microbial exposure that mainstream Americans lost 2 generations ago. Therefore, the jar is not magic. It is a delivery system for compounds that work, in a form that has been refined by 12 generations of plain women in Pennsylvania kitchens. Let me walk you through how the ferment lives in Miriam Byler's pantry, because seeing it is what convinced me. Into a clean quart jar goes a full head of garlic, every clove peeled and roughly crushed with the flat of a knife. The crushing matters. The crushing is what wakes the Elysian up. Beside the garlic goes a length of fresh horseradish root, scrubbed and grated coarse about the volume of a child's fist, though Miriam never measures. She measures with her hand, the way her mother did. A generous bundle of fresh thyme follows, stems and all, pressed down into the jar. Raw apple cider vinegar covers everything to within an inch of the rim. The vinegar must be the cloudy kind, the kind with sediment at the bottom of the bottle. Filtered, pasteurized vinegar will not produce the same result, and Miriam was firm on this point. The mother in the vinegar is part of the medicine. A square of waxed paper sits between the lid and the jar, because vinegar will corrode a metal lid over 6 weeks. The lid goes on finger tight, never cranked down. The jar travels to a dark cupboard, away from the stove, away from sunlight. By the end of the first week, the garlic has turned a soft jade green. This alarms first-time makers, but it is harmless and traditional. By the 3rd week, the vinegar darkens and the smell mellows. By the 6th week, the liquid is amber, pungent, sharp, and ready. The solids stay in the jar for the entire shelf life of the ferment, which in a cool pantry runs 10 to 12 months without losing potency. A spoonful in warm water at the first sign of a scratchy throat. A spoonful 3 times a day once symptoms set in. For children, half that, in honey water. That is the whole protocol. Miriam's family has used it through every winter she can remember, and the doctor in their nearest town sees them perhaps once a decade. But here is what no cookbook captures. And here is what Miriam shared on my 3rd visit, sitting at her kitchen table with the late afternoon light coming through the window, and her hands wrapped around a mug of mint tea. Her mother, and her mother's mother before her, did not seal the jar immediately. For the first 72 hours, they left the lid loose, barely set on top, not threaded down at all. 3 days of open fermentation. This is the detail that has disappeared from every modernized version of the recipe I have ever found in print. The reason, Miriam explained, is that the wild bacteria from the kitchen air, the same friendly microorganisms that have lived in that farmhouse for 140 years, colonize the surface of the ferment in those first 3 days. Seal it too early, and you lock them out. Leave it open for 3 days, and you have invited the entire microbial heritage of that kitchen into the jar. Then you seal it for the long ferment. This is why, Miriam said, the jars made in Amish kitchens work differently from the jars made in modern kitchens following the same recipe from a magazine. The recipe is the same, the microbial environment is not, and the 3-day open period is what bridges the gap. It gives whatever lives in your own kitchen the chance to enter the medicine. I asked her if she had ever seen this written down. She thought for a moment, then shook her head and said, "My mother told me," and her mother told her, and that is how it has always traveled. That is the secret finale, 3 days open. Then 6 weeks closed, 3 herbs, 1 jar, 7 cents a dose. 200 years of evidence, and not one doctor in 50 years thought you were worth telling. Eleanor still keeps 2 jars going at all times now, 1 on the counter in its first 3 days, 1 inch the cupboard finishing its long ferment. We have not filled an antibiotic prescription in our house in 2.5 years. Our grandchildren get the honey water version when they visit with sniffles, and their parents have stopped questioning it. This is not about rejecting medicine. This is about recovering what your own grandmother almost certainly knew, what her mother taught her. What one bad generation of bad advice convinced your family to throw away. You are not learning something new. You are remembering something old. So tell me in the comments, what did your grandmother keep in her pantry that your mother stopped making? Be specific. The jar, the bottle, the tin, the wrapped bundle. I read every comment, and the names of these recovered remedies are how we rebuild what was taken. If this resonated, subscribe and stay close. Next time I am sitting at Sarah Yoder's table in Intercourse, Pennsylvania. She is going to walk me through the bone broth her grandmother used to bring back women who had given up on getting better. There is one ingredient in it you will not believe is legal to buy. I will see you there.